and welcome. This is Matthias 76, and together we're going deep in the Word and the Gospel of Matthew. But I wanted to just make a quick announcement at the beginning of this video. Had some technical difficulties. There is a moment or two with some audio challenges, and then at a certain point, I think it's about 6-7 minutes in, the camera feed for me just freezes. Sorry about that. This was recorded a little while ago. Don't want to go back and record it again. The sound is still good for 90% of the video, and you shouldn't have a problem even understanding the places where it's a little bit garbled. Just wanted to let you know, we know that's going on, but everything should be fine. Hello and welcome. We are picking up in Matthew 15, verse 32, with the feeding of the 4,000. This comes immediately after Jesus healing a bunch of people. Now he's going to feed a bunch of people. And it's no doubt the same people, because he was here and he had been healing, and there have been all kinds of people he was healing. So these huge crowds were coming to him. And we don't know what that looked like, but there were masses of people who would follow him, who would come to him, and they were bringing their sick, their lame, the blind, demon-possessed, all of that. So then they would hang around and listen to him teach, which is another one of the things that performing miracles, that showing this compassion that he had did. People, you couldn't see him heal your brother who had been crippled since birth and not recognize that this was someone special. They say he's a great teacher. Maybe I ought to hang around and listen. Maybe this guy is the Messiah. You know, whether you're a Jew or not, the people who lived in these areas were familiar with what the Jews believed. They knew that he was something special. And once again, just to remember, get the map here. We have been for some time way up north here. Jesus is staying away from the small. Jerusalem's there. He's been hanging out way up here. Even the incident just 2 sections ago where the woman came and he said it's not right to give, to the dogs. That was up here, right up here. So he's saying away the Jewish power centers. These people were still Jews, but it's quite intentional what he's doing by where he's going and to whom he is ministering. So we will read Matthew 15, verse 32. Then Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat, and I am unwilling to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. Tells you a lot right there. A number of very important things. Jesus had compassion on them. He'd been having compassion on them, but now he's going to manifest that compassion in a different way. They'd been with him 3 days. How do you envision that? How do you envision that? Do you think that the Super 8 and the Motel 6 and the Holiday Inn Express were just booked, and these people had their campers, their tents, all of that stuff, their RVs? No. These people were so enamored with Jesus and what he was doing and what he was teaching. Because if you weren't buying in after he healed your brother who'd been crippled from birth, or gave your mom sight who'd been blind for years, you'd check out and head home. Why stick around? Because they had to be living out in the fields in order to follow him, in order to stay with him. And chances are they didn't bring a lot of provisions to come and hear him. And there weren't that many people in any of these areas where he was. They were coming from other areas, okay? But they've been with him 3 days. Everybody's run out of food by then. They have nothing to eat. I am unwilling to send them away hungry. He wasn't going to do that, lest they faint on the way. They were exhausted. They were tired. They didn't have food. There were going to be problems. And the disciples said to him, "Where are we going to get bread in such a desolate place to feed so great a crowd?" Let's stop. That right there. And you and I, whoever you are, however long you've been a believer, we can poke them in the eye about that. We can say, how can you be so daft? How can you not get it? All of the things that he's done, you've watched him walk on water. You watched him invite Peter to walk on the water with him, and Peter did. And then after Peter started to sink, he reached out and picked him up. You've seen him calm a storm at sea. You've seen him feed 5,000 people, 5,000 men, not counting women and children. How could you not just go, oh, yeah, he's going to do that again? Yeah. I want to make sure and take notes because it was so cool the last time. I want to make sure and capture all the details this time. But what did they do? Where are we going to get enough bread in such a desolate place to feed such a great crowd? We have no room. We have no room to point, it's the log in the eye thing. They've got a speck of dust. I've got a log in my eye because I have doubted more times than I could recount, and certainly more times and the details of which than I would ever want to share with you. I have doubted my God. I have doubted that he's going to provide. I've doubted that he's going to take care of things. I've doubted that he would resolve things. I've doubted that he would find me employment. I've doubted that he would help me pay the bills. I've doubted and I've doubted and I've doubted, and I just plain forget. So what we see in the disciples, just as when we're studying the Old Testament and we see with the children of Israel, all we're seeing is ourselves. That's it. No, I don't have a tunic. I've got a polo. I'm not there, but I am there. I don't have to look hard. It's always a good thing to do. Put yourself in the text. Where do you fit? Where do you fit? Are you with these people who are following and hanging on his every word? Yeah. Are you there with the disciples who it doesn't even apparently cross their minds that, oh, he's going to do that again? It was a one-off. And how could you forget it? Now I'll ask you, think of the most amazing thing God has done in your life. How did you ever forget it? But you have. You know how I know you have? Because you're just like me, and we all do this. The next time something big came up, you were afraid. Perfect faith casts out fear. Perfect love casts out fear. It's got no place. But I stumble and I'm weak, and he's so good and he's so gracious and he's so kind. All that he says to them, and Jesus said to them, how many loaves do you have? How many loaves do you have? What am I working with this time? How hard do I have to pray to my Heavenly Father before this is multiplied and you hand it out? And they said, 7 and a few small fish. I'll just say here, favorite cookbook title of all time. There was a church that we were associated with at one point in time, and the ladies in the church all put their favorite recipes into a cookbook, and they called the cookbook Loaves and Fishes and Other Dishes from this. 7 and a Few Small Fish. Absolutely love that title. Loaves and Fishes and Other Dishes. And directing the crowd to sit down. And notice, he takes no time to correct the disciples. He doesn't excoriate them. He doesn't say, you got to be kidding me. How could you not remember? He just asks them what they have, and then he goes to work. He took the 7 loaves and the fish, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. He just multiplies it. And what that looked like, it had to be amazing. That, they'd go take food to these people, loaves of bread, fish, and they'd come back and there were more. How does that happen? What does that look like? I've got no idea, but it had to be really, really cool to see that happen. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And if you took one of those baskets and just put the loaves, the 7 loaves, and those were just little flat loaves, right? 7 loaves and the fish, a few small fish. A few is what, 3? A few small fish in that basket, it would cover the bottom of the basket. And they picked up 7 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. Those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And after sending away the crowds, he got into the boat and went to the region of Magadan. Couple things. Number one, before I forget, he was going to send the crowds away, right? He just didn't want to send them away hungry, because he had to move on. He had other places to go, other places to preach the gospel. His message was spreading, his mission was spreading the message, proclaiming that the kingdom of God is here, right? He went to the region of Magadan. You know where that is? Neither does anyone else. We don't know. We don't know. It's a lost name. It's a lost region from context. He's there on the shores of Galilee. Experts who study this stuff and geek out on it think that it was probably somewhere on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, somewhere over here, but we don't know. And it doesn't matter. We are talking about something that was over 2,000 years ago. So if we can't pinpoint the location of every place, then that's okay. The loaves and the fish. We're big supporters of The Chosen. We love it. We think it's great. We've been watching it. We support it. It's an amazing presentation, and it's fictional. They pull a lot of stuff from the Bible, but it makes these people real, and you really get a feel for the times, the culture, and those things that I talk about a lot. I encourage all of you, if you have not, watch The Chosen. Their goal is that 1 million people, I think it's 1 million people will see this thing, right? Or 1 billion. They're in season 2, and there have been 194,500,000 views of it thus well done. You can find it on The Chosen. You go to thechosen.com, find the app The Chosen, and you can watch it. You don't have to pay anything for it. And then if you feel moved, you can support it. But the reason I'm talking about it, the guy who and his name is escaping me. If I don't try, I'll think of what it is. But the guy who's the director and writer of it, their motto is this. You don't have to feed the 5,000. Just bring the loaves and fish. God does great things with a little bit. We just give our humble efforts. And I'm not talking about financial support. I'm talking about whatever. If I'm realistic, every endeavor of the faith that I seek to undertake is too much for me, because I'm flawed. I'm flawed. I mess things up. I come up short. I've got a long list of shortcomings, okay, and failings, and a lot of years of living to prove it. I can back it up with a preponderance of evidence. But that's okay, because God does really cool stuff through what I do. God does really cool stuff through what you do. And what Satan wants to do is keep you on your sofa, feeling down, not moving. God can't lead you if you're not moving. God can't use you if you're not moving. Just seek him, pursue his guidance, share the word with others, help others, be kind, compassionate, feed the hungry, help the sick, visit the lonely. Just these things Jesus talks about. He'll do the rest. He does great things through that. That's just part of the humility of faith. I'm just supposed to put the effort out there and try and pray his blessing and guidance. And all of that from feeding the 4,000. It was the 5,000 before. This time it is the 4,000. Okay, on to the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They didn't like each other. The Pharisees and the Sadducees didn't like each other. They were different as different could be. The Sadducees were the party of the high priest. They were priests. They were the liberals of the day. They didn't believe in the resurrection. There's the old thing, and this is how you remember who the Sadducees are. The Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection. That's why they're sad. You see? That's the Sadducees. The Pharisees were the conservatives. The Pharisees were the ones who were absolutely over the top about observing all the law and then some more. Okay? So they kind of make strange bedfellows, but they're coming together because they're both against this guy. And the Pharisees and Sadducees came to test him. And they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. Before we move forward, test. They're trying to trip him up. There's that word test means just that. They're trying to get him to fail. They're trying to show him to be a phony. And a sign from heaven. Now, everyone knew, and it was undeniable by a preponderance of evidence, the things that he had done. There were too many people, and they had witnessed it themselves, many of these things. There were too many people. He raised the dead. He caused a guy who couldn't walk to walk. He gave sight to the blind. They investigated one of those quite carefully. You can read about that in John's gospel. All of these different things. He'd fed thousands. But what did they want? They wanted a sign from heaven, like Elijah in his showdown with the 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. They wanted fire from the sky. Elijah going up in a whirlwind. They wanted a heavenly sign. Okay? That's what this is about. And they didn't think he could deliver that. Because remember, they didn't believe in him. Which isn't to say they didn't recognize who he was, but because there's a good chance that they did, they just hated him. Okay? And they knew he would take their place away. And he made them look bad. because they were false and hypocritical and all of those things. But they didn't think he could do this. They didn't think he could be like Elijah and call down fire from heaven, eat up the sacrifices. He answered them. And again, he doesn't dignify their demand with an answer to the demand. He doesn't even address that. He doesn't even touch it. He answered them, when it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And when it's morning, it will be a stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you do not know, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. We'll stop there. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. It holds everywhere. It has to do with dust and pressure in the atmosphere, etc. But it is true. It's not just a wives' tale. It will tell you what the weather is going to do, except now they play with the weather so much that I don't know if it still applies as often. He's saying you can look at the sky and tell what the weather is going to do. It's somewhat esoteric. It's sky, it's over there, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times of this epoch and this period, this season that has come. You're seeing this stuff, just like you see the red sky at night, and you know it's going to be fair weather tomorrow. Red sky in the morning, in the east, right? As there's trouble on the horizon. Bad weather is coming. You can do that, but you can't see all these things. That I am directly fulfilling all of these different prophecies from the Old Testament that you know by heart, and you can't see that and say, wow, this is happening right in front of us. One of the things they do really well with the chosen, these disciples are faithful guys, and they had been waiting on the Messiah. They couldn't believe that they got to be right there with him. Very well done. But they can't interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given it except the sign of Jonah. And so he left them and departed. They wanted to test him. They wanted to challenge him. He was received in faith by all of these other people. And he fed them. He ate with them. He had fellowship with them. He spent time with them. He wasn't going to hang around to be attacked by these hypocrites. But do you notice? He never addresses what they asked. Went right beyond it. And here again, what you and I hear and what they heard, two different things. And it's all here in verse 4. I'll read it. I'll give you a second, and you see if you can catch it. An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah. Now, when he says this same thing in chapter 12, he goes, I believe, let me see. No, he says that they're just the same. Sign of the prophet Jonah. What's the sign of Jonah? He was in the belly of the whale, right? And came out 3 days up on the beach. And kind of leaves them to figure that one out for themselves. But he calls them an evil and adulterous generation. They heard that, and what they heard was Jeremiah. They heard Ezekiel. They heard other prophets railing, God through them railing against the sins of Israel, the northern kingdom, which is where they were right now, which was the worst kingdom, and Judah later on the same way. Evil and adulterous generation. Evil, that's easy enough to understand. But in the prophets, what is it God accuses Israel and Judah of again and again? Whoring after other gods, being unfaithful. I was a husband to you, and you keep running off after these other gods. He told the prophet Hosea to go marry a prostitute, and she'd run off, and God said, go get her, bring her back, forgive her, bring her back. And it was a visual prophecy of, this is what I'm dealing with. This is how I feel, right? So they heard that, and that was an insult at a much greater level, because they thought themselves, especially the Pharisees, they thought themselves to be better than their forefathers. Oh yeah, they were horrible, awful, and rebellious and sinful in all kinds of ways. And yeah, they deserved to get sent off to Babylon, to get chastised that way and then get brought back, but not us. We're faithful. We're true. We're way better than them. Right? It's like the person who naturally, if their father was alcoholic and abusive and all that, I'm going to be way better than him. I'm not going to be that, right? Understandably. They thought about their forefathers, I'm not going to be like that. And Jesus just said, you're the same thing. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign. You need proof of your God being who he is that meets your criteria. And here I am. And I've been doing it. And you know what happens? I'm just going to leave you. And finally, eventually, he says, I leave your house desolate. I'm leaving for the last time. And that was a foreshadowing. And we're talking about the end of Matthew now, when he's just railing against these guys. When you get to the end of Matthew, if you're going to, and when you listen to, I Love You version Bible app and them reading the things, they don't read it the way Jesus was saying it. He was just wailing, verbally bombasting these guys for being what they were. The hypocrites leading people astray, blind leaders of the blind, and he wasn't nice about it. He was very, very direct, just as God wasn't nice about it when he told Judah and Israel that they were degenerates, running off, whoring after other gods. And of course, that also has the connotation, contains the message that there was sexual perversion that went on with the worship of these other gods. So he left them and departed. He wasn't sticking around for that. And think about it. You have to know, in whatever situation, if it's in your career, at work, if it's in dealing with things with your church, there is a point at which it just becomes about the fight. It's just about the fight, and that's all it's going to be. If you continue on that track, it's just going to go on and on and on and on. And all that happens is you entrench the other side in their position, and it changes you, and it makes you bitter, all of that, okay? Here, if Jesus stayed around where these guys were, that's all it would be about, because everyone else in the crowd would defer to these guys every time. They wouldn't have said, hey, back off. Let us hear what he has to say. No one was going to say that to a Pharisee. No one was going to say that to a Sadducee. They weren't going to do it. So if Jesus hung around to fight with these guys, he wouldn't have been able to minister to everybody else. He wouldn't have been able to preach and proclaim and heal and all of that. And what would it have accomplished? There is no way these guys were going to believe in him. They weren't going to. That's why he didn't bother with bringing the sign, because they would have talked about how he rigged it, how it was fake, how it was a trick, who knows what. Besides which, who were they to tell him what he had to do to prove who he was? How does that work? I mean, Moses stammered and stumbled and said, before the burning bush, I really don't want to go. And finally said, please send somebody else. He didn't tell God he wasn't who he was. But that's what they were doing. And Jesus wasn't going to dignify what they said with a response. Okay, we're out of time. So next time we'll pick up with 11 of the Pharisees and Sadducees and the disciples struggling to get their minds around that. I want to thank you for listening. I want to encourage you. Give us a thumbs up. It really does make a difference. I also invite you to subscribe. And if you subscribe, then make sure and hit the notification bell so that you are made aware when we put out new content. Please share this video with others. Share it on your social media platform. Send it to anyone you think might benefit from this teaching. And finally, come and pay us a visit. This is our website, decodingthedeception.com. If you know our name, you know the website. We've got all our Bible teaching videos out here, as well as a host of other resources to help you be informed so that you can decode the deception. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. God bless and have a great day.